So for the past week now, we've had no water. And I think right now that's kind of a number one issue for a lot of ranchers and farmers here on the Navajo Nation.
We started our for-profit business in 2021. Right after the pandemic, we had our son during that time, and I'm sure everyone remembers nationwide it was nothing on the shelves, but especially here on Navajo, it was just like things were missing. Baby food was missing, formula was missing for like months, right? Just experiencing that ourselves really motivated us we had a 4-acre plot. We were just subsistence farming really at that time. We decided to diversify our crops and start dehydrating everything, and we kept it mostly for ourselves, for our son, for the whole year. But then started selling at farmers markets, and we're like getting a lot of positive feedback. And so we decided to actually formalize and make it into a business. So we decided to register as a for-profit LLC with the tribe. There are certain tax benefits that we get that way because of the Healthy Delineation Act that removes sales tax from traditional foods. We're farming on tribal land, we're registered with the tribe, we're going to be able to access like certain resources, and that was absolutely not the case. We did try to reach out to the Navajo Department of Ag and apply for their like farmer gardener program or whatever, and just got completely ignored and actually denied for these resources. At the time, we started reaching out to other funders because this plot that we're on now had literally no development. It was just dirt on both sides. I started reaching out to some funders. One of them just flat out said, a private foundation in New Mexico said, we will not be able to give you grants as a for-profit business, of course, but also if you register that as a nonprofit with the tribe, we won't give you grants either, because there's not that level of accountability. We have given grants to like tribal nonprofits or community-based organizations, and we've had issues auditing them. So we're not allowed to give to tribal nonprofits anymore. So we encourage you, if you are going to do the whole nonprofit route, do it with the state. And so that's why we ultimately set up this hybrid model where we have an LLC that generates revenue from our crops and our value-added products. And then we have this whole separate entity with the state of New Mexico, 501c3 nonprofit, to be able to serve as our own fiscal agent, fiscal sponsor, but also because we're wanting this to be a cooperative, and we needed to have this nonprofit side and be able to act as a fiscal sponsor for everyone, not just ourselves. Because we thought about maybe we should just get a fiscal sponsor for a couple of years and we'll be good. But then it's no, every single young farmer is going to have the same struggle. So we need to establish ourselves as a nonprofit to be able to help them write grants, hold money for them, and move this forward and allow for more growth that way. We recognize as a small family farm, even though this is a bigger operation for Navajo, it's still only 16 acres. We have a product that's gotten nationwide attention. We are the first native baby food brand that's been established in the United States. We've been invited to a lot of spaces and gotten so many high-level interests. Like Jennifer Gardner came out, shared her story and offered to support us. And, so we have the potential to really scale this up. And we've been offered different things, even with Shark Tank. And, we've been invited to these places that could really blow this up. But we also know that if we do that, we're not going to be able to grow the crops the same way. We're going to have to switch to a more industrial process. We don't want to do that. Planting everything by hand, picking everything by hand, making the crops that we make and the foods that we make is not just an important process for our livelihood, but it's physical, mental, spiritual journey that we feel like we need to do every year. We want to use our structure to offer 2 different pathways to young farmers. So they can come down this LLC path with us. So we have an established brand, and they can have their farm and grow under, our standard operating procedures. If they're growing it this specific way and we look at it, make sure it's the right way, then we can buy from them and do all the branding and scale our products that way. Or we can offer this nonprofit fiscal sponsorship if they have a different idea of what they want to grow, or they want to establish their own businesses, that they can use us as a fiscal sponsor to get the resources they need. We can help them find a land use permit. We can help match them with land. We can help build out their infrastructure, and we can share our heavy equipment with them and hold grants for them so they can just build their own company. We're getting more of the land worked. We're getting more locally grown nutritional foods into the local economy. Each year we want to we'll offer like a training program to 3 to 5 Farmers in Residence is what we're calling them. It's a farmer incubator program where we provide technical training and then we give them 2 acres to apply that knowledge onto. They get to work the land, they get to feel the impact of not having water and that stress, or they get to feel that great feeling of selling your crops. And they're all farm to school certified, by the way. We help them with that process too, so they can make a big $5,000 sale to a school and really feel that and put it in a bank account. They get to keep it. So we're trying to, address these systems level challenges that most farmer incubator programs don't do. We're not just here to teach farming. We're here to address mental health issues. We're here to address financial wellness issues, help them register businesses, help them start bank accounts, and be able to take off running. There's different types of co-ops. Some will just help you. There's equipment co-ops, right? Where one entity purchases these equipment and then people can share them or rent them or whatever. I think we're trying to be a combination of a number of things, but mostly we're interested in aggregation. Okay, let's say you have land, let's say you can grow something, right? But then getting it to a market here on Navajo is especially challenging because as a typical farmer on private land, you have the opportunity to sell to restaurants or farmers markets or there's a variety of different markets that you can sell to, right? Here, there's no high-end restaurants, all of the fast food restaurants, they have their supply chains already, right? There's one farmer's market on Navajo Nation that's here in Shiprock, and it's only for a couple months out of the year. You've got local flea markets, and then the greatest option for financial success here is institutional sales, selling to schools, food banks, elder facilities, and childcare programs. And there's the New Mexico Grown program here in New Mexico is what allows people to do that. On Arizona side, you have to get USDA GAP certified. In New Mexico, you don't have to if you go through this program. A lot of people don't know about it. It's free of cost, and we've actually become consultants with them to help train people here so they can go through that program, the training program, get certified, and they can start making those connections to these institutional buyers here. That's the only way people are going to be able to make enough money. And so through a cooperative model, you're able to meet the demands of institutional buyers better because some of the schools will say, I have 7,000 students to feed. If I'm going to buy local, I'm not going to buy from 10 different local farmers. I want to make one purchase, right? So cooperative model allows you to work cooperatively with 10 other farmers who maybe each plot has 5 acres, but collectively they can make 1 or 2 or 3 of those large purchases every year. And as long as there's one central entity that's aggregating everything, collecting, making sure everybody is up to permitted and connecting with those buyers and organizing the sales, that's ultimately what we want to do. We always want to stay connected with our farm and be productive and actually farm it, but we are limited as a small family farm in how much we can produce with our growing demand every year, not only for our baby food products, but just fresh, locally grown produce that the schools are wanting. We're not going to be able to do that by ourselves. We need to have more people do that, and it's beneficial for them to join because they're not having to deal with all the administrative back end that oftentimes deters a lot of people from doing it.
What's USDA GAP certified?
It stands for Good Agricultural Practices. If you hold that certification, then in most states, that's the requirement to sell to schools and these higher institutions. New Mexico, like I said, through the New Mexico Grown program, they have their own legislation that allows you to do food safety trainings that you have to do. You have to turn in a risk assessment and standard operating procedures and do an inspection with them. But it's all free of cost, and they'll get it done within a couple of months. And then you're added to this list of approved suppliers that buyers from across the state, schools, food banks, childcare centers, and elder care facilities can look at this list, find what crops you sell, see your phone number, email, and contact you directly, or vice versa. You have access to that list too, who the buyers are. As soon as you get approved, you can start reaching out. They can start reaching out. You can have guaranteed sales. So we already have $75,000 worth of guaranteed sales in the books already now. Your normal pathways that a farmer would go to sell their crops don't exist here. It's truly just institutional or direct to consumer. There's no in between. Shiprock Farmers Market does do double up.
Yeah.
And then you as an independent producer can do WIC on your own.
Yeah.
So we're a WIC farm stand here. We do WIC, but we every year we have less than 5 people that use it. Navajo Nation WIC does not do the Farmers Market Nutrition Program. They just don't. So you have to be enrolled with New Mexico WIC if you want to do that program on Navajo. And then, like with the double up food bucks, people didn't fully understand it, or sometimes like the internet at the Shiprock Farmers Market was down and they can't ring it up on the EBT machine. We have a lot of groups like off Navajo come and visit us, and they constantly ask us about like, why are we not using drip irrigation, or how are we conserving water? And I'm like, we are the only ones farming here. Like if we don't use the water, Zach always says, if I don't use it, it's going to go down into a swimming pool in Phoenix. Like I might as well use as much of it as I can. We're not so concerned about conserving as much as possible. Like Equip did put in this line that's underground here, and we installed everything above ground. It would normally be pretty easy, but quite honestly, it's more of like the lateral violence that's happening here that deters us from being able to irrigate the way we need to. So the river's right there. Head gates we got 2 on each side. There's plenty of, in theory, access. But every year, because the pipes are kind of old, like there's a leak usually. Navajo Nation does not fix it, or does not adequately fix it, or delays it. They turned our water off, stating that like the chapter didn't pay the bill, so they turned it off and just like wouldn't turn it back on for a week and a half. It honestly just feels like sabotage sometimes, where we are one of the most productive farms in this area, and yet every year we have to deal with a pretty significant irrigation issue.
And what is the things that stop people from getting started on Navajo?
It's got to be money, number one, access to capital. Then close second to that is access to land. In Shiprock alone, I think there's close to like 14,000 acres of designated farmland. All of it is already assigned or sitting in probate.
Yeah.
And getting that land sitting in probate or sitting with people that have let it idle for decades, if young people don't have access to land, then there's never going to be any sort of agricultural economy here. Like, we can't just keep transferring it to other old people. Like, that just doesn't work. And they can't just keep transferring it within families. There's people on Western Agency that would love to come over here and be able to farm this. Money, land. The next one would be housing for young people. We have put in like a travel trailer and a yurt here because we have people coming from Tolani Lake to farm here with us. And there's no housing for just like someone without a family or someone without like 10 people to live with, sort of household. There's no apartments or anything like that here. At the same time, these are like non-permanent solutions because we're not allowed to put in permanent structures on an agricultural land use permit. We're not allowed to build anything with a foundation. So how can we can give them the land, we can have the nonprofit ready to go if they want to apply for grants, but if they can't come and like have shelter and have their basic needs met, how are they supposed to be able to farm? So those are the 3 things that, again, our program is really trying to get at, those big structural challenges. I don't think there's any point in like training people on the little technical knowledge on how to farm if you don't have access to the money that you need to do that, and you don't have the land that you need to do that, and you don't have a place to take care of your basic needs. We started out looking at these 4 different areas, right? Like there's tribal funding, there's federal funding, state funding, and private funding. I think we've gotten about equal parts in these, maybe a little bit more private funding. We have one federal like USDA grant right now. It's a specialty crop block grant. And that was to support our Farm in Residence program and then also to build out that greenhouse and start getting that into production by next year, by 2025. So that's been helpful because a lot of the schools like our products, but truthfully, they mostly buy them during like Indigenous Peoples Month or Indigenous Peoples Day. So they'll buy from us for those seasonally, but they don't buy from us like throughout the whole year. So they were more interested in having like salad bar stuff and other specialty crops. So that's why we pivoted to that direction to meet that demand. It took a while. So you have to have a nonprofit status to get that grant. So that process took about 6 months to get a nonprofit status. Then you have to get a unique identifier number or whatever it's called. That takes a couple months. So I'd say budget a year to just get those things in place. So you have to have the capital up front to like pay and then get reimbursed. So I'd say like 2 years total. It's not a huge grant. It's a 2-year grant. It's like $120,000. Small grant.
Yeah.
So we pay for those things up front and then get reimbursed and just keep doing that at that limit. But there are projects, especially with like Equip, where we would love to like build some sort of retaining pond, these big infrastructure projects where you're gonna have to put up like, 6 figures and then get reimbursed. That is absolutely not possible for anyone here, even for us as an established business, that would be extremely difficult for us to cover. Yeah, Navajo Nation should definitely use AAF funding as sort of a bank where they can go in on the application with the individual farmer and then be able to front the money to pay for these projects and get reimbursed themselves, because there's no way that an individual or a farmer has the time to do all the admin work or probably doesn't have the skill. New Mexico Department of Ag has given us a lot of support. We got the Healthy Food Financing Fund last year, which was, honestly, if I had to pick one grant, that's the one that set us on a trajectory. And it wasn't even like that much. I think it was like 70,000 or something, but it was cash up front and it was for equipment. So we bought our tractor and all of our implements. That allowed us to just really scale up. Before that, we were asking for services from the chapter. We were borrowing equipment and we just could never stay on top of the weeds and things we needed to. That was a game changer. That I think is really hard with the state because of the anti-donation clause is usually what stops them from being able to give like cash up front or to be able to work with a for-profit business. So somehow, I don't know how, but they were able to bypass that and they were able to like give you the money up front. And within 3 months of application, got you the money. We paid for the tractor, we got it, you started moving. I've never seen anything like that happen that quickly. So yeah, the Healthy Food Financing, they're gonna do another round of it this year in October too, they told us, and we're eligible again to apply for that. Yeah, they literally sat with me and helped me fill out the USDA Specialty Crop Block Grant application, gave me like inside tips on what to put, what not to put. And that's the stuff you need. Like if I'm not a federal grant writer, I needed someone to say, don't use that word, use this word. Yeah. Don't put equipment in there because they're going to deny it if you put any equipment budget in there. Put supplies and do this. Again, I feel like if there's people trained in Navajo Department of Ag, that can be just either doing it up front, getting the grants, and then helping to trickle down the money in smaller amounts, that'd be great. Or if they're going to be able to provide TA to people that want to do it on their own and know all the tips and tricks, that is super helpful. And I'd probably say like close to $500,000 over the last couple of years in grants that's come to us has been from private foundations, the Indian Collective, Kellogg Foundation, a number of smaller like foundations that'll give us like 10, 20,000, Con Alma Foundation, state-based private foundations in New Mexico that'll give us small grants that we can piece together. They're great because most of them are unrestricted and they're cash up front. They're not reimbursement grants, but it's just the time that it takes to like fill out every single unique application that asks different questions. Yes. And, you know, that is very time consuming. The reporting for it is time consuming. Sometimes they want quarterly, but it's always nice to have private funding because a lot of times you have to front the money and get reimbursed. So you do need to have like we try to always have like 100,000 in the bank account at all times just to be able to maneuver that way in case we do need to make these big expenses and then wait for reimbursement, that we always have like a cash flow. So private foundations help us do that with unrestricted cash up front.
So do you think it could be beneficial if there was a full-time person at Navajo Nation Department of Agriculture that just assisted with grant writing?
Yeah, for sure. We're moving in the direction. We just agreed to work with Apex Applied Technology, I think they're called, a consulting firm out of Arizona who has worked on the western side mostly with like Star School or North Loop Family Farms. They specialize in agricultural, like USDA federal grants. And instead of actually like charging you, like normally consultants would charge you like a flat few thousand probably to apply for a federal grant, they write themselves in. So they're writing in like an FTE for themselves, like a 0.5 FTE on the whole project. So they're not just there to write the grant for you. They're there to help you with the invoicing, with the reporting, the documentation. They're there for the life of the project. They're not just, it's not just about writing the grant. It's about staying with you the whole process.